days off.
This is a recording made on the 10th of November 1972 with Miss Mabel Strickland, daughter of a former governor of Tasmania, Western Australia and New South Wales, then Sir Gerald Strickland. I think it'd be interesting, Miss Strickland, if you talked a little bit about your recollections of life in those early days when your father was governor here.
Well, it's some 54 years ago, at the age of 6, when I came to Tasmania. And my early recollections there were mainly of the Darwin River and the fleet coming in, HMS Powerful. And also we used to think the best thing for the schoolroom was picking up the tennis balls. Midshipmen and naval officers coming to play tennis.
Yes, I remember the fleet coming in every January and February it was, I think, wasn't it?
Your memory's better than mine as regards that, but we looked forward to the event. And then if there was a bush fire that occasionally happened, it was exciting, but certainly the last one that swept Hobart was very far from exciting a few years ago.
Yes.
When one's a child, one doesn't know the difference of what's exciting and what's disastrous. And then Mount Wellington was most exciting, with the snow and fern tree bars. And I think at Government House, Hobart, we were to be seen and not heard, of that I'm quite certain.
How many were there in the family then?
We were 4. That's right, yes. And I was the third. Well, the most exciting thing was once a year when Mr. Brown, who was official secretary, used to take us to Brown's River. It was about 12 miles in a train. And I remember years afterwards crossing Europe. It used to take 3 days from London down to Syracuse, wondering why ever we could want to go to Mr. Brown's parties in a train.
Well, I know Brown's River well myself.
Do you?
I used to go there as a child for holidays, and my father was born in the area, or Kingston as the village is called, as well as Brown's River. It's now a suburb of Hobart.
Well, I saw Tasmania about 18 years ago, and was surprised at the growth of Hobart. And they took us out and showed us the great forests and up to Launceston.
Yes. And what about after Hobart? Where did you go?
From Hobart we went to my favourite state, which was West Australia, where one was slightly older.
Yes.
We were there from the age of 10 to 14, and that was wonderful. We rode every morning in King's Park, where the red gum was in flower, and the black swans on the river. Then we went over to an island called Rottnest, which just consisted of Government House, a lovely sandy beach, and a penal settlement with a few Aborigines. And we'd go back in the lifeboat, or the pilot boat, the Lady Forest. Those were wonderful days, and this last visit, we saw Rottnest again. It's a playground for the people of Perth and Fremantle. It turned into complete town settlement. Nothing was the same, except the salt lakes and salt bushes and the beaches. Totally different. But the progress of Australia since 1955, when I saw it last, is something that you can't quite grasp, both in Sydney and in Perth. It's simply leapt forward. It had leapt forward since 1917 to 1955, but the last period is very much greater.
And is this your first visit to Canberra?
No, it's my second. I saw it in 18 years ago, 55, just for 2 days. But there was no water in the lake. It wasn't finished, I don't think. But they were all talking about what it is going to be, and now it's practically what they said it would be. But I don't doubt it'll still grow.
And what about Sydney, your recollections of your period in New South Wales?
New South Wales, well, I mainly spent up at Moss Vale, where then when the government of the day gave the governor a summer residence. But that's where I learned to really love the land and spent perhaps 5 months of the year there with my mother. My older sister used to help my father entertaining in Sydney. And my mother was an invalid, but she still entertained in Sydney, but not quite the extent of full energy. And Moss Vale was marvellous. I learned to milk cocky of Riverdale and rear the turkeys and became completely Australian. And this I do now. And yesterday I spent a day at Hawkesbury Agricultural College, and they wondered why on earth I could be interested. And when I told them that my early agricultural education had come from Mr. Potts, one of the first president's directors, they were quite surprised, and they couldn't have been kinder or more helpful. But there again, it was a totally different organisation. I mean, it just leapt forward. And my own feeling is that this great country is now a full nation, of which there's no question.
Going back to your father, what are your particular recollections of him as an Australian governor?
Well,
and of him as
I was
in Malta.
always very close to my father, but in his actual period of being a governor in Australia, in West Australia, he would take me back from Rottnest, and I would, quite young, do the ciphers with him. What we put into cipher, I don't know. We would talk to cook in the state schools of West Australia, and also to wash. I didn't mind cooking, I just liked washing. And what I cooked for him at Government House, I shuddered to think that it used to be just a couple of days and we'd go back to Rottnest. But I can't honestly say that at the age in which I was with him, beyond being delighted to be with him and doing what I was told, I wouldn't know, but I know that he was very keen on Australia and that he was governor for what was it, 3 states, as you've already said, and he was always certain of the future of this great country. He's quite right.
And is it true that he was interested to take a pretty active part in Australian life, not to be just a
he always
sort
took,
of governor?
in anything he touched, he took an active life. I think he knew more of us, of West Australia, Tasmania, and New South Wales than any other governor. My Uncle Wallace Lamington was governor of Queensland, and Uncle Wallace was always wondering why my dad had many more addresses and much more knowledge of Australia than he had. But he was a very live person, my father. And he knew every inch of the states in which he lived.
Yes.
I got to know him much better during his period in Malta.
Well,
but my whole mentality is basically Australian in thought, and so was his. It's quite sure.
Tell us a little about your life and his career in Malta and your own life in Malta.
Well, there, on account of my career at Moss Vale and my farming instincts, and he was keen on agriculture, and he was quite pleased that he had one of his children that liked it. And when we got back to Malta, he and my mother gave me the farmlands to collect the rents and to know the farmers, and that suited me. And so one got rather close to the people. That's really what happened there. And when it came to the possibility of responsible government, I was very, very keen that he should take a part in it. And I remember telling him one evening, it was after my mother had died and she loved the island passionately. She loved Australia too. I said I disapproved of absentee landlords. And he said, "Now go on, trot along to bed, good night." And next morning he came down to breakfast and he said, "Last night you disapproved of absentee landlords, and do you want to repeat it this morning?" And I said, "Dad, I don't change overnight." He said, "I asked you if you'd like to repeat it." I said, "Yes, I don't approve of absentee landlords." He said, "That settles it." I said, "Settles what?" And he said, "Well, you're not coming to England in a fortnight's time with your sisters." He said, "You're going to stay with your Aunt Ella, and I'll come back in August and I will fight the election and the Maltese Constitution. Have you anything to say?" "Well, could you possibly say anything under those conditions?" Whatever you might be thinking. And roughly that's how it started. And I got anchored in Malta, and it's been a very nearly 50 years of extremely interesting life in the Mediterranean between Malta and Britain. And again, he was really the founder of Maltese migration to Australia. He saw it as a land of immense opportunity. He was insisting that the Maltese had English as their principal language, because without English you can't put your foot in this country with any real success. And I think he would be thrilled today with the development and with what's happened here.
It was he who introduced English as a second language into the schools in Malta.
But it started a way back when he was Chief Secretary to the government of Malta, and it was Mr. Joseph Chamberlain's policy, and the Chief Secretary was carrying it out. And there's a long story there, mixed up with Irish and European politics, and free choice was established, and the majority learnt English. And then there was all the Irish troubles and other troubles, and he was promoted to the West Indies. And temporarily, unhappily, the British government reverted the Chamberlain policy and went back to Italian and English. You know what governments are like. And when we were back after Australia, because my mother wanted Australia rather than Westmoreland, where the family first came from, she loved the island better, where she married him when he was quite young. And that's how it happened. And then when he fought the elections, of course we fought it that there should be English as a principal language, and well, we won it. Now it is two languages are English and Maltese, and Italian isn't there. But that's roughly the story. Which out in this great country, there's quite a number of very successful Maltese. And that's,
do you think they're particularly well adapted
well, yes,
to settle in Australia?
Definitely, because the race is really first of Phoenician or Carthaginian origin. You know, the boatmen of the Euphrates and down across through the Mediterranean, Carthage, Malta, Cornwall, South Wales, Hebrides, and basically seamen.
Yes.
And basically fit in very much with the British. And to know the language, it's the main thing. And you're in sympathy. It's good.
Well, thank you very much. I hope you'll do a longer recording for us when you go back to Malta, will you?
I've enjoyed it enormously.